Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're listening to, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Celtic Down Under podcast. Hosting tonight will be myself, Sean. Tonight I'm joined by Anthony and Paul, and we are absent our friend Tommy, who is taking an emergency trip to the vet. I believe it's not for himself, but for his pet dog. But either way, he's not been able to join us tonight. Anthony, how are you? How's your week been?
Very good, Sean. Enjoyed Australia getting a very close victory against England in the Ashes, so that was enjoyable. Was up to 2:30 in the morning watching that, so that was a great day at work. The following that, and caught up with my brother and some mates on Saturday night, so it was nice to see them and a few beers, and that's pretty much been it. But yeah, no, all good. Busy at work, but that's just par for the course at the moment.
I would imagine our comment section will be absolutely rife with chat about the Ashes. It's obviously a hot topic in Scotland that everyone deeply cares about. But yeah, obviously, other than hoping to see England get beat at something, yeah.
And also the whole like thing about we're keeping cricket entertaining, and we had a higher run rate. It's like you didn't win though, and then they come out and say afterwards that it felt like a win. So there's hunnish qualities to the England cricket side at the moment, but we'll part that to one side.
Nothing like arrogance and entitlement, which I believe is how the Ashes was conceived, was because England just felt entitled to dominate cricket, and then when Australia went over and whipped them, they came back with the Ashes of English cricket was the headline. Paul, how are you?
Yeah, good. Similar, although I went to bed an hour before the Ashes finished. I'll be honest. I was trying to get ready for there's football to get up for as well with the Scotland game, so I tried to balance it, and yeah, it didn't quite work out. But still happy with the result, and yeah, I've had a relatively tame weekend. A few beers involved, nothing too serious. Caught up with some mates. And yeah, there was a bit of football news in between as well, which we'll get into in a second.
And just before we get to round the ball, our favourite sport, I'm just wondering if Shane is listening in, and if he wants to pipe up in the comments, if he is.
Oh yeah, right spanking.
Yeah, his favourite team, the West Coast Eagles, was it the third or fourth biggest defeat in history? Lost by 171 points.
Their biggest ever.
Their biggest ever for sure, but I think it was third or fourth worst of any of the scrub teams that have ever existed. And to add some context for people listening in Scotland, if you score 100 points in an Aussie Rules game, that's considered exceptional. So to lose by 171 was pretty spectacular. So yeah, and I guess since we've been on, we've had our Scottish national team do well, and I'm looking forward to seeing the FIFA rankings come out with that. There's been a lot happening. Paul, do you want to touch on, or Anthony, who was it that texted news in, the sad news in the last half hour?
Yeah, so sad news, just breaking news that ex-manager of Scotland, Craig Brown, passing away at the age of 83. So sad news. He was manager of Scotland he had quite a while. He had quite a few campaigns.
71 games, I think I read. So yeah, longest ever Scotland manager, I think, in terms of number of games. And I just checked there, a 45% win rate. So pretty decent. Took us to the Euros and the World Cup. So it's been long. We're all old enough to remember that just about, which puts a certain age on us. But yeah, he had at the time, he was held up to, those were decent campaigns, but I think there was it's still back then, there was a level of expectation that's kind of where we should be. Obviously, we've been in pretty dark times since then, and we no longer take such things for granted. So with the benefit of hindsight, yeah, he had a bit of a golden period for Scotland. And obviously he was part of Andy Roxburgh's backroom staff. I think he was assistant to Roxburgh for Italia 90 and Euro 92 as well. So yeah, he was involved for a long time, and obviously part of football for way longer than that. I think he had some club spells and managerial post Scotland and Motherwell and Clyde and
Aberdeen maybe?
Yeah. And then I think his playing career was cut short through injury. But yeah, sad news. But but it definitely leaves a legacy, particularly with the national team.
Yeah, I guess that makes him born in 1940, something like that, round about then. So
The reports
fair.
did say 83. I think he's just come up short. I think his birthday's the 1st of July, so he's just
Okay.
shy. But yeah, near enough.
Which would make him 39. So he'd been born Second World War, rather. Yeah, I remember. I think he had us up at ranked about 14th in the world at one point, if I remember correctly, around about 1999. I think that was halcyon days for us after we'd played at the World Cup, and then I think for that Euro qualifier we beat England in their last ever game at Wembley, and then they kept on tacking on games after that, so that a Scotland victory wasn't the last ever game at Wembley. So they had like a game against Germany that was a friendly, I think. Went,
I think it was certainly the last competitive game, I think, for sure.
Yeah. And then they chucked on another like Scotland versus England celebrities game, and they lost that. And they at that point they just chucked it like, oh yeah, we just need to pull this down. But yeah, it was good. Good days. Sad news for Scott Brown. Scott Brown. Craig Brown.
Scott Brown's very much alive. I'm just trying to say, I mean, at least
this week as well.
At least he sort of saw Scotland on the rise again, because we've actually strung together some really, really good results, and we're now unbeaten in 4 matches now. That's us.
No, it's 4 wins. 4 wins.
Yeah, sorry, 4 wins. Yeah, so it's 12 points.
Unbeaten in a year, so unbeaten since last June. So 8 undefeated, 7 wins and a draw. May
rest in peace.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll get on to our Celtic chat now. The Celtic chat portion of the game. We have. I was trying to drag out a little bit for 5 minutes there because I'm going to use some intellectual property which doesn't belong to us, and I'm under fair use policy. It is fine, but just to avoid it automatically being flagged, if you can get past 5 minutes, YouTube only really scans the first 5 minutes for swear word and IP violations. So again, we'll be fine, but just to avoid any automatic disputes. So what we'll do is I've picked out some sound bites, and if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see some of the visuals of Brendan Rodgers' introductory press conference. Now, this was the official press conference where PLZ and BBC were not permitted to enter. And I think Paul's got some notes on the fan press conference, which was quite similar, but he'll kind of add those in as well. But we'll just bring up a few clips and we'll just react to, what we make of these comments. Because, let's be honest, we were all very much waiting for this press conference to happen to see what he said. And one of the first things that we kind of, or the biggest things, maybe not the first things, but one of the biggest things that was talked about was, is Brendan Rodgers going to say sorry? To the point where on last Tuesday's show, Stephen vowed that he would do this week's show tomorrow naked if Brendan Rodgers said the word sorry. And luckily for us, he did not. So let's just a quick clip of what he did say.
It's natural. When I left, it was a sad moment. And I certainly don't regret it. But what I do regret is the hurt that it caused people. And it's the very reason I'm sat here today. As a Celtic supporter, I understood what it meant. And probably even more so when I left.
So, Anthony, Paul, what do you make of that? Not sorry, but does have regrets about hurting people. Are we buying it?
I'll go first. He's not sorry. He doesn't have to be sorry. He's an ambitious guy. He took a job. He left. Yes, I dare say he knew there'd be some flack leaving middle of the season when he did. He's come back. He's acknowledged it in the press conference. That is as close to an apology as you're ever going to get. I wasn't looking for one. And he's an ambitious guy, and he's Brendan's about Brendan. And I thought on the whole, the press conference was pretty good. So I thought he came across really well. I thought he even came across better in the fans press conference, which I watched both of them today. And I just kind of felt that I was like, he said his piece. He's here to do a job. He wants to improve the team. He's not expecting it to be wholesale changes, and he just wants to get on with it. And I'm okay with that, basically. He didn't say anything that I thought was controversial or disagreed with. And he's it's not saying sorry but not sorry. He didn't say sorry. He's acknowledging how some fans are feeling. And let's face it, we're talking about a reasonably small minority, that has gotten smaller and smaller since his name got touted a couple of weeks ago. So, yeah, no, I have nothing. I don't have any issues with what he said, and like I said, we were never getting an apology, and like I said, I wasn't expecting one.
Paul, you holding out for an apology, or are you happy?
Nah, I never wanted one, and I don't think you need one. Like, you've not nicked somebody's sweets from the playground. At the end of the day, as Anthony says, he's professional. He actually said, "I don't regret what I did," which is great. Stand by it. If you're gonna walk out on Celtic in mid-season, have the courage of your convictions and stand by it. And he absolutely did. And I didn't expect anything other. I know fans wanted, some people out there wanted an apology. I don't think you really were ever going to get an apology, and neither should you have expected it. I think what I heard from a lot of fans, and it was touched on in some of our other shows on the Tuesday and Wednesday nights, is at least some contrition. And I think if that's what you wanted, you probably get that from saying that he regretted how he made people feel. He must have kind of known that would have been the case. So ultimately, you give with one hand, you take with the other. But yeah, I thought it was fine. It needed to be addressed in some way because otherwise people just wouldn't accept it. Period. So I'm glad he covered it. Hopefully we can just park it and move on. And yeah, we'll get into some of the other clips, but I think the rest of the press conference really looks to the future, and I think that's what we all should be doing, and hopefully it's as positive as it was last time, if not better again.
Got Patrick McLaughlin saying he's lying if he says sorry. He can't start off with a lie. And Robert Gibson saying Rodgers is about as sincere as a used car salesman. Now, personally, whenever I've quit a job in the past, I've always been quite apologetic, but I don't know if that's just kind of a shorthand, like just a quick way, just the Canadian thing. Hey, sorry, that. I don't know if I'm really thinking about it when I say that. Like, am I sorry? I'm not sure, but yeah, I think he gave himself a few days to be well rehearsed in what he wanted to say, and he's thought about it very, very carefully. And he's deliberately chosen the word regret, and he's been very specific about what he regrets as well. So he's thought about it beforehand, and it's a well-prepared answer. He obviously knew it was going to be asked of him, and yeah, I don't know if he could have answered it any better, to be honest. And if you listen to the whole press conference, if you want to look at kind of how some of these the media training is overdone these days, you should listen to some of Michael Nicholson's responses. I didn't actually clip any because he doesn't actually answer a single question that he's asked. Like he does that whole thing where he gets asked a question and then answers the question that he wanted to be asked. Like he doesn't actually answer the question that he's being asked. But yeah, we can talk about that. So in terms of regretting hurting Celtic supporters, Rodgers also had this to say:
it has to be unified. It has to be together, and like we were the first time. Let's see if we can create those memories again, and they were special memories. And as I said, from this day forward, we stay together.
So does that sound, Paul, to you like he's kind of a rallying cry to the supporters? Let's say we need to all be together on this one. Do you think it's going to be an issue going forward? Do you think the fans are going to boo him when he comes to his first game? Is that going to be banners? What do you reckon?
Difficult to say, isn't it? The Green Brigade doubled down on the announcement and retweeted the photo of the famous banner trading immortality for mediocrity. I hope they view it. Yeah, well, in the same group, aren't they? I think they're effectively all part of the same group. But yeah, I hope they play that a bit smarter and sort of switch that banner around or something a bit, a bit of sense of humor. At the end of the day, he's back. He might, we've suck it up and get on with it. I agree. I think he's right. Like at the end of the day, the only thing that can hurt Celtic at the moment is Celtic. If we split, if the fan base gets split, it gives our enemies and detractors something to, it's a weaker point to attack. So I don't know if it was a rallying call or as much, I just could see it as a rally call. You could see it as an olive branch, to be honest. He's sort of making it clear to anyone who isn't, on the bus, as I like to phrase it, then, at the very least, kind of work towards that, or don't actively oppose what he's trying to achieve. So yeah, I just think you just need to be grown up about it. You don't have to fall over your and love him and have this huge emotional connection to him like maybe some did in the past, and certainly most of us did with Ange. At the end of the day, he's here to do a job. He's it was mentioned a lot of times in the press conference, and I agree with it. He was the strongest candidate of those available to take it forward. And with the young, hungry quality squad we've already got, plus financial backing, and straight into the Champions League, he stands a brilliant chance of having a successful season. So I can see there's no benefit to trying to snipe from the sidelines or detracting him. I certainly hope he doesn't get booed by the North of the Green Brigade or any other fans. At the end of the day, if you're not happy, shut up. Until there's something to properly complain about, it's water under the bridge as far as I'm concerned. He left, he's back. We were successful last time. I think we'll be successful again. Let's all push forward and hope we are.
Strange Love the Doctor reckons we weren't unified back at the start of Ange's reign. And it took time, and I guess he's saying it just clicked once everything happened on the pitch. Anthony, anything you want to weigh in on this?
I think what Brennan said outside in the stadium with the microphone when the fans greeted him, he said, "Oh, if you don't sort of believe me now, then I'll see you back here in May, and maybe I've won you over then," sort of thing. So he realizes he isn't going to have 100% universal like the first time he did when he sauntered into Celtic Park. So he knows he's going to have to get the team performing, and that will inevitably bring everyone on board. And that comment was right, because Ange had a couple of bad results to start his campaign. The way he lost to Hearts. We took us 4 away games to win a game away. It was that game against Aberdeen away that really kick-started the season, particularly away from home. And that's when all the fans sort of got together and went, "This guy's actually got something." So it's not unusual for there be a bit of trepidation or a bit of the support, maybe not 100% behind the manager. But as far as booing him and actively sort of, I can't see it, to be honest. I just think that, those that aren't 100% behind him might not cheer to begin with, but then ultimately you're cheering the players on the park. So they're still the same, and hopefully we get the performances that we know we can. So I'm not overly worried about it. And like I said, I think just better time will sort all that out.
Yeah, I guess to go back. Sorry, Sean. Just to go back to that, I guess look how split we were. Post the 10 in a row failure, and yeah, the guys are right. There was a lot of uncertainty about Ange, predominantly because people didn't or most people in Scotland didn't know much about him. But yeah, a few good results and you turn it around. So I think it'll be the same. I did see a funny tweet post the "I'll see you back here in May" comment, where somebody tweeted and went, pretty disappointed with that comment. I hope the league's wrapped up by February. Which, I thought that was decent. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Oh yeah, if it's in our comments, I've lost it. Yeah, there's a few kind of debate in the comments at the moment about how backed Ange was. I don't think we're quite a fair representation of that group, being that we're an Australian podcast. We were all kind of behind Ange before day one almost, and then we never really lost faith in him, but we're not exactly representative of the supporters that hadn't heard of Ange. So of the main press conference, the clip, the quote that was tweeted widely almost immediately as soon as it came out of his mouth, and one that may come back to haunt him, but certainly one that's been pinned to walls as, right, you've said it, is this one.
Do you see yourself being here for the long haul for several years?
Well, hopefully. Listen, I've signed for 3 years, and I'll guarantee you I'll be here for 3 years unless I get emptied before that.
Are we buying it? Paul, buying it?
Well, look, it was the one sort of eye popper, jaw dropping moment in it where you went, did he really say that? It was just a bit of a surprising comment. But as Anthony said earlier, it was clearly well rehearsed and well polished. So for him to let the word guarantee get out of his mouth at all, I think he must believe it. 3 years is a long time in football. 3 weeks is a long time in football if we think about the cup final to 3 weeks later. So pinch of salt as far as I'm concerned, but if you want us to dissect it, you kind of got to assume that there was a comment from Michael Nicholson that there was a mutual commitment to that contract. So, they haven't arrived at a 3-year number, by pulling balls out of a bag. Do you know what I mean? It's not a cup draw. I think they've clearly had a chat. And for him to then say he's definitely going to see out that contract, he surely expects to do that. So I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one. On the one hand, I'm tempted to say, he has 2 good years, and a decent sized Premier League team comes in for him, or a top Spanish side comes in for him, and you'd expect him to go. But then why say it? Do you know what I mean? Like, no one in the fan base we've all settled into this view before the contract was released that whether he signed a 1-year rolling or a 5-year deal, we've, after Ange and after Brennan previously, we're now of a view they've got a 2 to 3 year lifespan absolutely max. So I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one for me. You can argue the toss either way. But I guess on the face of it, he has got a mindset that this part of the project is 3 years. And does he need 3 years to redeem himself after walking out partway through the season? I don't know. Maybe with some people. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But I'm not holding much. Like, I think it's the one thing he said in the press conference where he left himself hanging out in the wind a little bit, with something that can come back and bite him. But yeah, it doesn't really bother me too much.
Yeah, everything else was kind of along the track of what you would expect. Apart from that was definitely the what? We did not expect that, and there it was. I'll put
Red
up some
Scotland.
comments.
Red Scotland.
I'll put up some comments, and Anthony, you can respond to them if you'd like. Red Scotland, I buy it. Jamie Young, this is interesting. He will stay or else. I think that's probably not a unique opinion. Michael Ross, he said can't go back on his word now. And Mickey Monaghan, maybe Mrs. Rodgers wants to set route for 3 years, so maybe he's basically saying the missus is calling the shots here in this one. Robert Gibson, he will piss off first chance he gets. Interesting. And Red Scotland, he loses credibility among Celtic fans forever if he leaves before the terms. He said this for a reason. He believes it to be true. Anthony.
Well, when you go back to when he left Leicester, some of the sort of media that he did then, he was pretty insistent he was going to take 12 months away from the game. So we've managed to drag him back. He left Leicester in April, I think. It was end of March, start of April. So it's only been three months. So we've brought him back early. So obviously the offer on the table was a substantial one. Now, that offer obviously would be financial remuneration, but you'd like to think there would be a war chest there to spend to do better than he did the last time. And ultimately, if you're going to go back to the same job and you've won an invincible treble, then logically, how can you improve upon that? Well, the only way you can improve upon that is to have a run in Europe. So we'll touch on that in a bit. But if you take the fact that he was going to have a year out of the game anyway, then effectively he's only really seen this as maybe a 2-year thing, because if he's going to have a year out anyway, then it's 2 years after that, and then he'll see himself as potentially being rehabbed enough to have another crack at the mental English Premier League. And to be fair, maybe he wants a bit of time away from that, that whole thing. Because, the more money there is, the more scrutiny, the more everything. And I'm not saying you don't get scrutiny as a Celtic boss, you absolutely do, but it's just, down there, it's just absolutely crazy. So, I'm saying I firmly believe that he's going to be here for 3 years. Anything can happen. Anything can happen. But I think, honestly, at this point in time, he sees this as a 3-year project. So, you get behind him and see what we can do. But he also acknowledged the fact that he's not coming into a burning building. He's coming in with strong foundations. He's got a good squad. He's not saying he has to go in there and rip the whole thing up and start again like he did the last time. He's coming in. He's talking about introducing a few quality players to elevate the squad. and do well in Europe. So I'm kind of hoping that he hits the ground running, and we are sort of wanting more and more and more. The last thing we want is another crap season in Europe, and then turn going, oh well, what could have been. I get what Paul's saying, that he's sort of left himself a bit exposed by making that comment, but it's a 3-year deal. He's committed to it. Celtic's committed to it. I think 3 years is a good length of time. So if he has these 2 good years and then the third year he starts sliding a bit, which I mentioned last week, then we have the option of saying, well, all right, Brendan, this is going to be a last season. And if somebody from English Premier League comes calling after 2 seasons, well, we'll get some remuneration. So it cuts both ways. So I think it's good business. I don't have any issues otherwise.
Yeah, and if he leaves for free after 3 years, you're right, it's fine. Whatever. If we've won 3 trebles in that time, great. On you go. Or even if we've done well in Europe, we'll talk about that when we come to it. So, Michael Ross, can't say I wanted Rodgers back, but he is, so I will back him 100%. And then in response to that, we had Conor O'Brien saying, same, I wanted Knutson, but Rodgers was my second choice. So here's what Rodgers has to say.
I'm a better manager when I sat here 7 years ago when I first came, and certainly from when I left 4 years ago. The experience is good and bad, always help you, and that was the beauty of coming back to here. It's an amazing club, and I can come back with my experience and hopefully help the club keep move forward.
So do we think, we'll start with you, Paul, do we think that we have got a better manager now than Rodgers Mark 1? Or do we think that it's simply that Rodgers is the best available and he's not going to be too much different from the first time when there was some discontent? Certainly, even Rodgers himself said in the fan press conference that we weren't as good in his later parts of his spell. What do you reckon? Is he a better manager?
Well, I think he must be, right? So, if you're take his specific example out of it, we've talked ad nauseum about what he achieved when it was less than. He had them punched above their weight until his funding got cut. But you operate at a higher level and then go and test yourself in a more difficult environment in any profession. And to his point, whether your experiences are good or bad or a mix, surely that makes you better at what you're doing, because you're seeing stuff that you haven't seen before. So, I think he's right. He's obviously going to talk himself up and say that the 4 years weren't wasted. Otherwise, what's the point in doing it? Other than to line his pockets. But we've got a little goldfish bowl in Scotland. You beat the other lot, and you pretty much win everything, or you should do. And he's done that already. So, it's clear that it's clear from the press conference. We'll come on in a minute. Both press conferences, including the fan media, and obviously the tipping point for him to come back has got to be Europe. And he's had some success there with Leicester, and you can pick and choose what you feel about his performance there last time, and I'm sure we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But yeah, I think he is a better manager. And I think common sense tells you he must be, just from the nature of the experience he's had since he's been away.
Well, it's come up both. You've both mentioned it in your last responses, so I'm going to jump to it, the Europe question that we've been talking about, and what our kind of benchmarking is for Brendan Mark II. So I'll just play the clip. It's a little bit longer, this one.
Listen, I think first and foremost, your bread and butter is always Scotland. So you have to ensure that you have dominance whilst you're here. But what I would like to think that we can do something in Europe, and that means it's well documented over many years. When the club hasn't qualified or gone through a great record in terms of European football. So even though that is a challenge with the resources that other clubs will have in terms of European football, it's a great challenge for us. Get Champions League football this season and look to have European football after Christmas. And like I say, that's a great challenge for us all. And
so he wasn't any more specific than European football after Christmas there, but he was a little more specific in the fan presser. Paul, have you got that written down, what he said?
I don't know if I do. I think no.
Well, he was specifically asked in the fan presser about winning a knockout round in Europe. And he just kind of
I think he
took
said
the
that would be
question.
nice. I think he said, yeah,
Yeah.
of course, that would be nice. That would definitely be progress, I think is what he said. So obviously he understands that there's, it's a while since we've done that.
Yeah, 2004. So by the time we get to knockout rounds this year, if we get to knockout rounds this year, then it'll be 20 years since. Was it Villarreal? No, we lost to Villarreal. I can't remember who the last team we knocked out was, but it was back in that year. But Anthony, for you, what is the measure? What are we benchmarking here? Like he said, bread and butter Scotland. He said Europe after Christmas. What do you expect? And you can grade it on year by year if you want, but what are you looking for?
Well, I mean, we've won that many trebles in the last few years that you start feeling like we're just destined to keep winning trebles. But realistically, you can come unstuck in a cup tie. It can happen. So for me, winning the league's non-negotiable. Like that again guarantees you entry into the Champions League the following season. So we've got to win the league. That's anything less than that is failure. Simple as that. And then after that, I think that the goal has to be to either finish second or third in your Champions League group. Second obviously takes you into the next round of the Champions League. Third drops you into the Europa League. So that would obviously therefore mean that you've got European football after Christmas. And if you've got European football after Christmas, I'm not that bothered about the Scottish Cup if we're competing in Europe. But obviously, if I'm not saying we bomb out of Europe, but we finish fourth and don't have any European football after Christmas, then fully expect to win the Scottish Cup and win the double. And if you win the League Cup, you win the League Cup. But for me, that's kind of how it falls, depending on how we go in Europe. But I'd like to see us make a bit of fist of it. And we had our chances in Europe this season. We just didn't take them. Be it Maeda, Kyogo, they snatched at chances that could have changed games. We had early chances, didn't take them. So I just want to see us make a good account of ourselves and give ourselves the opportunity to progress. And I think Brendan has enough nous to maybe do that. And just very one-dimensional in that we play one way and it was very obvious and we knew what we were all doing. But I just think that Brendan may have a little bit more tweaking that can just maybe get us across the line and be a little bit smarter in our play, particularly if we're under pressure, playing against better opposition. But like I said, for me, winning the league, non-negotiable. And then, like I said, hopefully a run in Europe after Christmas, whether that be Champions League, Europa League, whatever. But failing that, then it's got to be the Scottish Cup. So, a double if that doesn't transpire.
Michael Ross saying, what did make me breathe a huge sigh of relief was Rodgers saying he would be more pragmatic in Europe. And I think that kind of comes on the back of, he said it was something to do with a Man City game where Leicester beat Man City 5-2. And he was saying that was the kind of first time that he'd really gone with that, not aggressively pressing. And he seemed to take that tactic and he got Leicester to the semi-final of the Conference League. Paul, would that be happy for you? What would you sacrifice domestically to get to a Conference League final? Let's just go with it. Let's say the lowest. I don't know. Can you drop to Conference?
I don't
League
think
final?
we can get it. We
can't.
can't get in the
Can't.
Conference. So the lowest would be Europa, and we'd still
Europa,
have to finish third. So look, I agree with Anthony. You got to win league, right? Especially next season. And that's one of the reasons why there was a lot of nervousness around disappointment with some of the names that were mentioned, because there was a concern that if it wasn't somebody with a decent track record and a quality candidate that could get things up and running from the start, then it doesn't take much to lose the league. Do you know what I mean? If your main rivals win most games, then you've got to win pretty much every game as well. So, or at least those 4 games are going to potentially decide the title. So, look, I think first season back, we've got automatic. So I was thinking about this beforehand. In each of Rodgers' seasons, he had to qualify for the Champions League, which he did, and we all know how much of a pain in the arse that is and how hard it is. You start really early. You haven't got players in. Some players are considering going out. Nobody's had a rest. Everybody's rusty. You've lost his very first competitive game to Redim's Gibraltar 1-0, and then obviously it was a catastrophe. Got absolutely slated, and then we won the home game 3-0, and the rest is history. So get qualification both of those times was pretty well done. And I think the second time we dropped into the Europa League, first time we finished 4th, second time we finished 3rd, dropped into the Europa League, got beaten by Zenit St. Petersburg after winning the home leg 1-0. So, he did see European football after Christmas, and he had to go through a qualifying thing. So I think that's one of the attractions to take. And it's probably one of the things that swung the job, is that he's got a young squad, already settled, already a position of strength, and he's straight into the Champions League without any messing around. And if he knows if he wins the league first season, he's straight into the Champions League in the new format second year round. So he knows he's got that opportunity to test himself without all the messing around with the qualifying. So that'll have been a big attraction. And it just allows extra time on the training field pre-season to work on, to Anthony's point, different tactics and different formations and different ways of playing. I think we will see more, in-game transitions between, tactics, formation, and other bits and pieces, and we'll see us set up differently for certain games. Now, that might be away at Ibrox, but it's more likely to be in Europe. So, yeah, I think for me, I still want and expect a treble. At the end of the day, the cup competitions are 4 games and you win a cup. So with, we said we had a decent depth this year. I think we will have better depth going into next season. There was a comment about getting rid of some dead wood. We do need to get rid of some dead wood. And Ange, there you go. Still in love. Rodgers did say, 1 or 2. And I think it probably might be more on 1 or 2. It might be a net 1 or 2. But yeah, I think we should see first team players coming in, and that will genuinely strengthen us. And so, look, I think even finishing 3rd in the Champions League is a tall order with coming from pot 4, and we'll need to get really bloody lucky in the draw, and then we'll need to play really well in the competition. If we get unlucky in the draw, even if we play amazing, you're really up against it to get 3rd. But we'll see. I'd be quite happy with another treble and a reasonable showing in the Champions League, win some home games, maybe scrape to 3rd or luckily miss out on 4th. But yeah, I do think, I saw one of the comments, it might have been from Red Scotland, saying, it was pretty ambitious, a quarter-final of Champions League and or a final in league, the Europa League by the end of the 3 years. And that, I think he did say that sounded like, a hefty, fanciful is his word. There you go. But, if we talked about it before, if we don't see genuine progress, and that's going to be turning over the squad and reinvesting and all the rest of it, you got to aim high. I think one of the things Rodgers said in his press conference is, this is a club that allows you to dream or encourages you to dream or something like that. It was one of his more romantic little phrases that he came around with. But it's certainly, he's right. We've got to be ambitious. And there's no point he's not coming back here to win trebles. He's coming back here to win trebles or doubles and do something in Europe. So I certainly think he's got a really good starting point, so he doesn't have to go through that qualification phase.
So I think it was, I can't remember who I'm plagiarising this from, but I think it might have been Tom English on the BBC made the point that in terms of clubs at our financial level, there's generally 3 out of the 16 in the Champions League over the last couple of years each year. So it is possible. I don't think there's been too much progression in terms of winning games. So if you're talking about quarterfinals of the Champions League, that's quite a lofty ambition for me. Europa League final seems more realistic, and not because there's poorer teams in the Europa League, more just because I think teams don't take it seriously. Like if you get like a Manchester United or whatever in the Europa League, they're going to be playing their backups. Whereas if it's us, we're going to be like, okay, let's rest the guys in the Scottish Cup or rest the guys in the League Cup, and we'll absolutely focus on the European game that's midweek. I mean, if we're going neck and neck in the league, I don't know. That's a bit hazardous, isn't it? Would you want to be resting players before a Europa League semi-final if we're neck in the neck with Sevco in the title race at that point? Would you see it, Anthony? How would you feel about that?
Well, it comes back to your depth of squad. So, I mean, you're not necessarily resting, you're just sort of rotating. So, you ideally want, 18 players that can fit any position and not weaken the team. So, I think my biggest sort of criticism this season was that, there's probably only 15 or 16 last season. So we kind of need to expand that to 18, 19 players that you can call upon and rely upon. We also got quite lucky with very few injuries last season as well. So, like I said, if you, I think Paul's right. Is that net? I think 2 or 3 quality players, first team starting players, and then that's obviously also accounting for any losses or any players that depart. So because inevitably there will always be 1 or 2 that might not fit the new manager's system. So there might just be a natural progression there, and I don't mind that because you get stale if you've got the same players year on year. So you need a little bit of turnover just to keep it churning, keep it fresh. Give players that maybe didn't get a look in before a bit of a look in, and obviously bringing players in to challenge players who are maybe already established in the team, saying, well, all right, you're up against him now you've got to try and find another level, find another gear. So so I just said I don't, depends on the situation with our squad, but I hope we're in a situation where we can just rotate players and you're struggling to decide who your strongest 11 is because you've got players champing at the bit to sort of say, well, it's hard to say, are they better? It's just more of a strategy thing or a rotation thing. So.
Yeah, and look, we thought we had a pretty strong squad coming out of January, and then we make 3 changes for Ibrox and get our asses felt. So I don't know, you kind of always need to be getting stronger. And I've got a couple of clips on what Rodgers had to say in that.
Before you jump in on that, I just said, I think Michael Ross mentioned it, but I was going to jump in and say it as well, was that the Europa drop down thing isn't going to happen yet, because we move into this bigger kind of Super League, Champions League thing from not this season coming, but the season after. So I don't think there is that opportunity to drop down. I think they're 2 completely separate tournaments at that point.
But 24 teams go through instead of 16.
But in terms of actually going on a long run and winning something,
yeah,
you'd need to be finishing, you need to be finishing second and not qualifying for that tournament to get that run. That's we're never going to want that, are we?
Yeah, but also if you finish 24th out of the 36 teams, then you get a Champions League knockout, right?
Yeah, but it could be one more. It could be one more round. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you have to win 2 games.
You'd want it. You'd want to do that. But my point, I guess the point is that there's been a lot of chat about going on a run into a European final. And realistically, if this new format stays, it's not going to happen, is it? Other than maybe this year, if we drop into the Europa, it'd be like a one crack at it.
It's a fair point. Yeah, but to be fair, if Scottish teams keep underperforming in Europe, then that automatic Champions League place will be gone anyway. So we'll be back to qualifying.
We'd rather not be thinking about that as an option, do we?
Yeah, it seems likely. Once, in a few years, I think that'll be the case. So, what was I saying I was going to play? Oh, I forgot now. Was it the quality? Yeah, okay. So this is what Rodgers had to say in terms of the squad and transfers when he was asked.
It's not lots of numbers. I think Ange, when he came in, he had a massive rebuilding job and done a brilliant job at that. And over the last couple of years, himself and the club, they'd built a really, really good squad. So it's a case of continually developing that squad and then adding quality where we can.
What does he mean by that, continually developing the squad? Is that youth players, transfers? What we're on about here, Anthony?
Well, I think we all acknowledge that one of the big things that Brendan Rodgers did the first time he came in was actually improve the players that stayed. So, Scott Brown being the obvious example, everyone was saying he's on the strap heap and he was done under Dyla. And he got a new lease on life under Brendan Rodgers. In the fan media conference, Brendan Rodgers was taking quite a lot of credit for the development of Callum McGregor. He said that he was very polite. I know polite wasn't the word he used, but very sort of quiet on the training field, and he needed to be more, have a bit more about him. And he felt that he was responsible for unleashing the inner Bruni in Callum McGregor. So, if he's taking the credit for that. So, point is that we touched this last week, just the fact that there's quite a good ceiling on quite a lot of our young players at the moment. There's a lot of room for improvement and development. So if he can get, most of those players playing at a higher level than they were playing this season, then immediately you've got an extra 10% in that team before you start bringing in new players and new talent. So that's kind of how I look at it is that developing the squad and also turning over the squad as well, because this is I feel one of Rodgers' downfalls is that the need to hang on to players rather than, if somebody wants to go, let them go. Take the money, reinvest it, move on. Don't hold people there against their will or longer than, if they're hitting their ceiling and their price is at their best and somebody's interested in buying them, maybe it is the best time to let them go. And then, like I said, if it's done early enough, you've got time to reinvest. And obviously we've signed Thiago home. We're obviously in for Mark Rotilio. That should hopefully be announced sometime this week. So we're doing business early. And this is, again, one of the things that attracted him to the job was Mark Law and the Stroutons set up in the network. He feels it's a lot better this time around than the first time around. Basically, by the sounds of things, it was non-existent. He's happy that they're tapping untapped markets. So they're looking outside the box. They're looking at Asia and other areas that not necessarily places they'd have looked at before. So I think that was, again, one of the big stumbling blocks last time. He felt that the recruitment was crap for one reason or another. And he feels that that's been improved upon this time around. So that's reassuring in a way. It sort of also says that if the manager goes, like, Ange left, that the whole thing just doesn't, it's not a deck of cards and the whole thing just falls apart. The structures are there, the targets are there, and that the ball keeps rolling and things keep happening. And then if the manager goes, new manager comes in, the ethos of the club, the signing policy of the club, we're a selling club, we buy young players in, we develop them, we sell them on for a fee, and then we reinvest and we go again. And if we can just get that trajectory just ratcheting up the way, then we start getting closer to an Ajax. That's where we want to be. And if that means having a slightly higher wage structure, but it's based on your regular Champions League appearances, so be it. But that's kind of where I think we've got to look at ourselves. We've got to just try and gradually ratchet that up, not shoot up and be unsustainable and turn it into Sevco, just gradually sort of ratchet it up. So you're buying a player at 2 million, you sell them for 10. So next time around, you buy a player at 5 and you sell them for 14, 15. And it just incrementally goes up. Not every player is going to be a winner. You're always going to get some losers, but we've had a pretty good run up until now. And like to think that that's down to the scouting network that's now at the club.
So just some names coming up in the comments. Paul, maybe you can respond to them. Mickey Moynihan saying McCarthy going to be the new Canty, and Conan O'Brien. I'm looking forward to the Brendan effect on some players like Maeda and Turnbull. And in terms of those players, and then we've also got B saying Rodgers had Rogic and Armstrong. He will try and replace those types of players that wouldn't have fitted into Ange's team. Anything to say on that?
Look, I think McCarthy's done, isn't he? Like, I can't see him being the future. Turnbull's an interesting one. I'm still of a view we should sell him while he's got 1 year left on his contract, albeit that he probably does fit more into a Rodgers system where he plays a 10. But I think O'Reilly's probably the prime 10. Haksabanovic could play in there as a 10. And you look, that might be a position you'd want to strengthen as well, potentially. If, I think one of O'Reilly or Hatate will probably go. I don't think we'll let both go, but I think we might take, if there's a big offer for one of them, I think one of those could go. So we might, add into that creative engine. Maid is an interesting one. My initial thought for him is, he really suited an Ange system. And he isn't as technically gifted as some other players. And with Rodgers' desire to retain possession, consistently, would there be a place for him? But he's a player that can probably be coached to a higher level. He's certainly got the high intensity that you would want. And Rodgers will press, maybe not to the same degree as Ange, but he will want to press as a unit. So he's definitely got that. Be interesting to see. But where would he utilize him? Because, I think my gut feeling is that Jota will go off the left, and if he's still here, Abada off the right, and or an upgrade on that position. So yeah, it'd be interesting. Would he settle for being a player that's rotated through the squad, or is he another one that will want to push on? And if there's an offer, do we make a good profit on him and then reinvest that in the squad. Be interesting. I thought he was perfect for Ange's system. But he'd be a real danger in Europe if we try and play on the counter attack in Europe. But can you keep him just for 6, maybe 8 games? I don't know. But certainly, he's got all the right attributes to succeed, and it's just a case of if Rodgers can find a place for him in the team, and if he wants to hang around for that next stage.
Mm-hmm. There's a comment earlier from Patrick McLaughlin I just want to pick back to. He said, Rodgers has been quoted as saying Forrest has a huge contribution to make this season. Is Tellio there to take over that role? And does that mean that there will be no other right winger signed for this season? If I'm being honest, Patrick, I would not read too much into what Rodgers is saying about James Forrest, because I believe he made similar quotes about Chris Commons, who did not kick a single ball in the Invincible season. So I wouldn't be reading too much into that.
He also said, Forrest is at a different stage of his career.
That's what he
Cal.
said.
And then he said, he's still got a contribution to make.
If he stays fit.
If he stays fit, he's still got a contribution to make. So I see that as him being, an older head. We also, James has been around forever, but we all still think of him as that young lad. So, he would be one of the, more mature players in that dressing room. And there's, 100 goals, 100 assists, amount of trophies he's won. He's absolutely a useful part of that squad, but I wouldn't expect huge amounts of game time from him. But that said, we thought Brownie was done, and Rodgers got a tune out of him his first time round. So you never know. I wouldn't be surprised to see the odd cameo from Jamesy in the coming season. It's not that long ago he scored a hat-trick against Hibs to get over that 100 mark. So, it's still there in domestically, at least, I would say. So, but I do think we'll probably add at least one more right winger, maybe more if Abada goes, for example.
Well, we're getting close to the end, so one more Rodgers comment for us to review, and it links to a comment from Strangelove the Doctor earlier. He said, I wouldn't set arbitrary targets. Try to win every game playing the Celtic way. Now, again, this was something that Rodgers sort of addressed specifically in the press conference.
The football philosophy is not too different in terms of how we would work and how a Celtic manager is perceived to work with his team. As an attacking club, where you have to not just win, but you have to win stylistically in a certain way. And Ange's obviously done that, and hopefully my period before we were able to do that. So it's a continuation of that, and looking to continue to build on that.
Are we expecting to see a dilution of Ange's style of football, or a continuation of that with just adjustments here and there in Europe, for example? Anthony?
Well, I think, the one thing I was critical of Ange this season was just sort of flogging players and sort of really being ultra aggressive, like when the game was well and truly won, and still pressing and really putting them under a lot of pressure. And is there a lot to be gained from that? So I think you'll see a little bit, maybe a little smarter, a little bit more intelligent with pressing, but pressing, when it's necessary and, when it's needed, but a bit more ball retention, but, just conserving energy, particularly as the season goes on. So for me, I think that's kind of what you'll see. And you'll see pressing and you'll see attacking football, but it won't just be gung-ho, hell for leather. He made a comment about he had a right back at Liverpool. He played as an inverted fullback, so he's familiar with that system. And I don't say he's necessarily going to throw that away either. But I just think that we'll just be a little bit more circumspect at certain points in the season, just so that the squad's not running an empty. Because I think the intensity of training from Ange was always very, very high, and I just think that's very hard to maintain that. And that's my cat having a wee yell in the background, like 2 weeks in a row. Thanks for that. So I might just leave it there and mute my microphone so I can have a wee chat to him.
Paul, what tactical changes are you expecting?
Yeah, look, to Anthony's point, I think, we will just see us a little, and I think we touched on it earlier, we might just see us a little bit more, a bit more flexible. I don't think he'd be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. He was asked, I think it might have been in the fan media, about tactics, and he used the phrase "little tactical tweaks and fine tuning." So, and he went back to the stylistic stuff and, fast, aggressive. I think there was one point in the press conference, like, I'm not sure which one it was, but he said, and I sort of linked this back to the unify comment. He sort of he touched on it both. He said, it'd be similar to Ange, high tempo, fast football, progressing the ball forward, creating goals, scoring opportunities, and defending together. And then he added, and with the supporters, that makes us a real force. So I thought, I think I don't expect it to be massively different to last time. But I think, to the earlier point about, 4 years extra of experience, and I think he has, to Anthony's point earlier on, he has made more, I guess, changes to tactical setups at different times. So I think we will see a bit of that, a bit of horses for courses. But yeah, we know that he tends to, have more like 2 in the middle and a 10 as opposed to 2 8s and 1 sitting back that we're used to. I think we might see some retention of the inverted fullbacks. I don't think it'll be as rigid and a constant as it was under Ange, but I wouldn't be surprised to utilize that. Look, certainly unless he's going to throw out GT and replace him with Bernabe as an overlapping fullback, or buy somebody else completely, then it would be daft to not continue to utilize GT's ability in the inside channel, because that's one of the things that transformed into a massive threat and, one of our best players in the last 18 months. So I think it'll be interesting. We all sad to see Ange go, but from a point of discussion, like I've never seen the comments so busy as we have since Ange left, and there'll be plenty for us to talk about and review as we go into the new season, and we see him, see Brendan set up the team differently, and see which players find their feet in that system and come to favour, and others that maybe isn't quite gonna suit, and may choose to move on. There was another comment that Rodgers made, I think, about he would give every player an opportunity, and he would sit down and chat with them and find out what they want. And if they want to put the effort in and they want to be there, he'll be 100% supportive of them. But if they don't care, he won't care. And so he couldn't really have made that much, and that doesn't seem massively different to how Ange would have been. Like, if you wanted to be there and you were going to put the effort in to be part of the squad, then you had a chance, and if you didn't, you didn't. So if you weren't, then you didn't. So yeah, look, it's I think we'll see a double pivot more than we did on Ange, and we might see those wide players just getting a little bit closer to the central striker. If you think about it, like, think how many goals Forrest scored when he was playing technically right wing. He was much more central, as was Sinclair. And they scored a lot of goals. So it'd be interesting to see. I think it's quite exciting to think how Jota could perform, getting, playing a bit closer to a central striker and having more of a remit to get in the box and score goals. So yeah. And Abada's got the same threat as well. So I think that's another reason why I think people are feeling positive about maybe Abada coming back into the team. He's probably a victim of how much Ange wanted and enjoyed Miera. And conversely, Abada's probably the biggest threat to Miera's jersey, albeit from the opposite side.
Yep, and I'm just hoping that we don't get Strangelove has mentioned, reassured that Rodgers spoke in the stylistic intent of his Celtic side. That last year under him was a pedantic, possession-based borefest, and I just remember my abiding memory of it is just Scott Brown dropping into that hole between the centre backs, and it's just, here we go again, cycle the ball across, cycle, and it was just, I used to just get so frustrated with it. So I'm hoping we don't see that. I'm hoping we get the urgency that he's talking about. Mahesh, last comment, will say the risk is Rodgers will be down at least 10% on final thirds relative to Ange ball, and that means more draws and line ball in the league. Again, it's a worry. Hopefully, the whole better manager thing is just we're not going to see that again, but we will see. And hopefully we'll just get some continuation of Ange Ball. So any final thoughts, guys, before we check out? Anthony, do you want to get your cat to say goodbye? Or
no, he's down the hall. He's down the hallway for the moment, so I better speak quickly while he's not here. Two things. Yeah, I know, shouting Moy. Yeah, where is Moy, by the way? That's all right. We'll come back to that. Just a quick one here from Michael Ross. Thoughts on Tilio? I don't actually watch the A-League, Michael, so you're gonna have to tune in to the Tuesday, Wednesday shows because they a few more followers of the A-League, and I'm sure they will give their hot thoughts on Tilio and give you some insight. I unfortunately can't give you any of that. And lastly, I just wanted to quickly mention the BBC being banned or barred from attending the press conference. Them and PLZ Soccer, I think the two that didn't get a look in. So it was based on some comments from Tom English in an article he wrote, basically saying, Brendan Rodgers back, bagging him out. And he was also on a podcast being quite sort of controversial, contrary. So I think I'm not one for banning media and turning into the Huns, but I also don't think it's a bad thing to just put a wee shot across the bows early doors and just say, pull your head in. Because, let's face it, the BBC at the moment is basically a rehab home for, for ex-Huns. The whole panel is stacked. So, I mean, I think it doesn't hurt just to give them a little reminder that, two can play at that game. So I think that's fair enough. I actually had a bit of a conversation with Tom English on Twitter about his comments that Rangers are stronger this time around. I did say, well, that was the Rangers team that just finished the season because they're losing quite a few players. And then he was quite sort of what's the word? I'll come to me in a second, but you're basically throwing Kent and Morelos under a bus saying they're no good anymore. And it's like, this guy has been on radio waxing lyrical about those two for quite some time. So I think he's very good at sort of, what's that word I'm looking for? Thinking history, rewriting history sort of things. So yeah, like I said, I don't have a problem with it in this instance. Retconning, yes. So they're my two sort of wee final thoughts for this week. And the other thing, I just was coming home and I saw a wee clip of Rick Astley at Glastonbury, and he was in good form. So there's my music sort of tip if you haven't seen that for this week.
Paul?
So I haven't got much to add on Tilio either, albeit that a little bit of research that I've done shows that I think he plays mostly off the right wing, but he's a natural left footer, so more for cutting in. Pretty young, scored a few goals, apparently rough round the edges. Although a lot of people down here are saying he's the best prospect out of Australia in many a year. So I don't know. It'd be an interesting one. Would he be first team ready? I'm not 100% sure on that. But as Anthony says, the actual Australians rather than the Scottish that are based in Australia will probably give you a more detailed view. So that's probably Shane and Jared on Wednesday's Pot Noodle would be the show to tune into. Yeah, a couple of Melbourners, albeit that Shane will probably still be crying about the Eagles. But yeah, he'll be very keen to concentrate on the football coming back with the way the local footy has been going. I'll just do a music review or recommendation as per. This one was album release in March. I was listening to it back then, but for whatever reason, I haven't mentioned it since. So second album, Wigan band called the Lathams. The second album is called From Nothing to a Little Bit More. They are one of a few British bands that are trying to get back on the I guess guitar-based indie stuff from the time when I listened to it, bro, a bit of Britpop and late Brit, mid 2000s. So yeah, they're one of a few guitar bands that are coming through. Tommy mentioned another, the Snuts, a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, their first album was great, How Beautiful Life Can Be, and then yeah, second album From Nothing to a Little Bit More. Get your lugs round that.
Sounds good. And yep, just to reiterate what you guys said, the Wednesday crew will absolutely have the inside knowledge on Tilio. You mentioned, Paul, is he first team ready? He's got 5 caps for the Socceroos for Australia. So at the very least, he'd be first team ready for Hearts, who seem to be populating most of the Australian national team these days. I think there was 5 SPFL players started that game against Argentina. 3 from Hearts, 2 from St Mirren, if I'm remembering correctly. Messi scored a double. So, you know, I don't know if having a Socceroos cap is a measure of success. Well, who did you know who we chatted about this? The man of the match in the league final for the A-League was this lad. What's his name? Used to play for Sevco.
Oh yeah, Cummings.
Cum dog.
Jason-
The cum
Jason-
dog.
Yeah, the cum dog. He
Jason
was man of the
Cummings.
match in the final for the A-League.
Scored a hat trick, I think.
Yeah, that's the standard. So I think he would need a period of adjustment to get up in the quality. We all remember Daniel Arzani. Other than that, we're just a little bit over time, but thank you everyone for listening. Our show last week got to 1,000 views on YouTube. That's awesome. So that means across all platforms, we're probably double that. So brilliant. Thanks everyone that's been listening in, been watching. Thanks everyone in the comments for contributing. Keep it civil, please, as always. All contributions are valued as long as they are civil, in which case, if they're not, I'll just mute you, block you. Can you please follow us on these social medias? Hold on. Anthony's cat meows 2% of the podcast. I think that's Michael actually making fun of the stats. But anyway, we try to keep it civil. So follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all those things. Please like this show. Please share with your friends if you know anyone that wants to listen into some nonsense about Celtic. We'll be here every week. Other than that, thanks, good night, and hail, hail.
Hail, hail.
Hail, hail.